So, everybody, I'm here with Blake Newton, right?
Yep.
Saying that right?
Mhm.
All right. We're going to talk about, well, what got this started was talking about what I call granddaddy longlegs.
Mhm.
And it kind of grew into spiders and other insects and stuff like that. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Love to talk about that stuff.
If you don't care, just tell everybody what your background is and who you are and what you're doing here.
Okay, so I'm an entomologist at the University of Kentucky. I'm a part of what we call Extension. So every county has an extension office in Kentucky, 120 of these offices, and my job is to help those counties interact with the public on any concerns, questions about insects and their relatives. And mostly what I work with is youth and 4-H.
Okay.
And my background is that I got all my education right here at the University of Kentucky. I have a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in entomology. And I happened to do my master's research on daddy longlegs.
Did you really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Mhm.
You are the man then. So, what brought you to this study? What
Yeah,
got you
so
here?
it's kind of an interesting story. This is something I tell kids a lot because a lot of kids are sometimes scared of bugs. I was more scared of bugs than any kid. I hated bugs. I loved going outside. I actually grew up in Round County. My backyard was the Daniel Boone National Forest. And so I
Cave
spent
Run and all that.
all that stuff, yes.
Yeah.
I spent almost every second of my childhood in the woods, and I was not scared of anything. I was the kid who brought home snakes, but I did not like bugs. I would sometimes, if I found a bug under a rock or something instead of a snake, I would scream or start crying because I was so scared of them.
Really?
Yeah, I really was.
Yeah, master's degree in entomology.
Yeah, and I have memories of finding a spider on my arm and like screaming, and my grandpa, "It's just a spider. What are you worried about?"
Yeah.
But so I was interested in animals, right? I was interested
Sure.
in all these animals. I go to college. I become a biology student. I take all the classes that you can, right?
Right.
All the animal classes, all the plant classes. Still had to fill out a few credits. And so the bug class was like the last one. Remember Pee Wee Herman in Pee Wee's Big Adventure when the last thing he had to go rescue the snakes?
Yeah.
And he didn't really want to rescue them, but he did anyway.
Right.
That's how I felt about taking that last bug class. Like, I didn't really want to do
I
it.
love stories like that.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it. But I did, and the class was just so interesting. And of course, we weren't actually handling bugs. We were just learning about them.
Right.
And so what I found out was by learning about them, by learning which mouth part does what, which leg does what, that there really wasn't anything scary on most of these things.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so once I started
Nice.
learning about them, I became fascinated by them. And in particular, what's so cool about them is, you know, we've got how many species of snakes in Kentucky? 20 something.
Mhm.
How many species of mammals? Like 100 or something like that. We got about 15,000 species of insects.
Oh, wow.
So there's
Okay.
an unlimited
Just in Kentucky.
Just in Kentucky.
Right.
So there's an unlimited amount of things to study and learn about with insects. That's what's so fascinating to me.
So, since you're a master's degree in granddaddy longlegs,
Yeah.
so is that a name that's a local name for me? That's what I've always called them. Is that what most people call them?
That's
not in your position, but I
right,
mean,
right. In the common name, yeah,
Yeah.
from a common name perspective, yeah. That's what I always hear is daddy longlegs. And when I say that name, to me, what I'm talking about are the spider-like creatures that have a very circular body
Mhm.
and very long, thin legs, and
Mhm.
they take up a lot of space, like about 2 inches of space.
Right.
They walk around pretty slow. But what's complicated about that is that there are at least 2 other kinds of not really closely related creatures that are also called daddy longlegs.
Okay.
And so that's
So
kind
you
of worth
said
talking about as well.
spider-like. They are not a spider.
Right. The thing that I consider a daddy longlegs, it's a more appropriate name is harvestman.
Mm-hmm.
And they belong to a group of creatures called the Apiliones. That's the harvestmen, and they are in the arachnid group, but they are a separate arachnid group from spiders. So they're
Okay.
sort of related to spiders, but they're a different group.
What makes them different?
And what makes them different is pretty apropos. One of the main differences is that daddy longlegs have no fangs and no venom. Spiders
But-
do. Yeah.
But they're the most venomous. No, let me say it
Yeah.
correctly, but incorrectly. They're the most poisonous spider in
Yes.
the world, right?
Yeah. And so when I talk to kids, I'll often
But
try to.
you said yes to me, but you're saying no, that's not true.
That's not true,
Okay,
right?
okay,
It's not true. So when I'm talking to kids, I try to preempt them whenever I'm talking about daddy
Right.
longlegs. I'll go ahead and say, by the way, they are not venomous. They have no fangs. And invariably, a kid will raise their hand and say, but they're the most poisonous spider in the world. It's just that their teeth are too small to pierce human flesh.
Right.
That's the phrase that I get almost verbatim every time, and I have to
Yeah.
re-explain. No, Actually, what makes them not a spider, they're not a spider, is that they don't have any venom at all. Instead of fangs, they actually, once you get up close to them, they have two little crab claws instead of
Okay.
fangs.
So do most spiders have some sort of
Yes. Venom.
venom?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Even like
almost,
a wolf spider?
Yes. Oh, almost every spider species in the world has fangs that deliver venom. There's really only a handful of exceptions of spiders that don't have venom. It's just that in most cases, the venom is not dangerous to us. It's real
Right.
dangerous to a little housefly, but to us, it's not
Yeah.
dangerous. But there are a couple of exceptions to that, but definitely not with daddy long legs.
And we're going to get into those. We're going
Yeah.
to take a look at some brown
Mhm.
recluse and stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
Because we're here in the lab at the
Mhm.
entomology department of the University of Kentucky. I should have said that. Had to go through a cool process designated by the, who'd you say, USDA?
USDA.
Got to go through 2 doors to get in here because
Mhm.
we don't want this stuff getting out and weird stuff getting in. So we're going to take a trip around, look at some stuff. Cool.
All right.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
As far as granddaddy longlegs in our ecosystem,
Mhm.
what are they there doing?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I studied for my master's degree. It's actually kind of mysterious what they're doing out there. We still don't really know.
Hmm.
What we think that most of them are doing is that they're wandering around scavenging things, eating dead insects, dead pieces of maybe plant material. Sometimes they'll eat insect eggs, stuff that's pretty easy to catch because they're not venomous
Right.
and they're pretty slow.
Okay.
So they eat just sort of easy to find stuff.
Okay.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I see when I'm out in the woods a lot is that they'll congregate together
Yes.
often. What's going on there? Why are they doing that?
They're known for making these aggregations. I don't think it is well known why they're doing that. Presumably, it has maybe something to do with mating.
Really?
But nobody seems to
Wait a
really
minute.
know. Whenever I see them congregating, though, they're not mating. When they mate, you can tell because they do it face to face,
Yeah.
and they have to kind of link up together face to face. It's a really strange process.
Yeah.
But whenever I see them in aggregations, they're just sitting there. And then when they get mad at you, they all start sort of moving around and stuff.
This might be a simple question, but there's distinctly male and distinctly female.
Yeah.
Okay. And so can we, without a microscope, see the difference?
Sometimes, in some of the species, the females will have a little bit of a bigger, rounder body, and the males will be a little bit narrower, a little bit smaller. And in some cases, the males have kind of like tusks.
Oh, really?
come
But
up.
the females don't have
The
those
females
tusks.
don't have those, but at least the common species that I can think of, the males and females will at least look a little different from each other.
So how many species of what I call granddaddy longlegs are there?
Oh, in Kentucky, we probably have, I don't know, maybe 20 or so, maybe less
Really?
than that.
Interesting.
And in the world, I can't remember how many species there
Okay.
are. Probably
Okay.
a couple thousand.
So they're one of the other things that I have noticed is that they have a defense mechanism where they'll just leave one of their legs behind.
Yes, they have. I think it's the word for that is autonomy. Just like a lizard tail, they are meant to break off very easily because if a predator gets one of those legs, they might lose their leg, but they still got another 7 legs,
Right.
and then they have their life, so they can escape with that. So yeah, they do lose their legs very easily.
Is there anything in particular that really goes after granddaddy longlegs? Birds, I mean, in general, I guess. But
That's a good question too, because although they are not venomous, they do have some nasty tasting chemicals in their body, and they'll actually spew it out a little bit. So they're not very good tasting. I don't know what is eating them out there. I imagine birds and spiders will probably eat them, but I don't think they're anything's favorite thing to eat.
okay, so is that their only defense mechanism?
It probably
aware
is
of?
because they other than they one thing that they can do, since they're kind of high off the ground, they're actually kind of good at getting away from things, even though they're sort of slow. But yeah, they don't otherwise, other than the leg autonomy and the frothy bad tasting stuff, they really don't have any kind of defense.
Okay. What's the lifespan of these little guys?
The ones I worked with would live about a year or less. I'm not sure what the record is on some of the species, but just like a lot of things in the spider arachnid world, it would be like a couple of years or less.
So when you say this word arachnid, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so arachnid is a group of creatures that includes spiders. It also includes daddy longlegs is their own group. Scorpions is one of those, and then also mites and ticks. Those are 4 distinct
Can we
groups.
talk about ticks today too?
We will talk about ticks. It's very important to
Okay.
talk about. And there's a couple of other weirdo groups in there too, but those are kind of the main groups of arachnids. And the thing that distinguishes arachnids from insects is the number of legs. So the arachnids all have 8 legs. the insects all have 6 legs. And so that's a way when you got a
Scorpions
critter
have 8
down there.
legs?
Scorpions have 8 legs. Their
Okay.
claws are actually mouth parts. So they have
Oh,
the mouth
cool.
parts plus 8
That's
legs.
cool at parties.
Yes, it's always good to have. It would be like if
I don't
we had-
like you.
Well, you could also hold your beer right here if you had.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh
PC
man.
beer right
We're
here.
doing okay. So let me tell you, everybody, I collected other questions from some of the community members as well as instructors. That's why I keep looking at my notes. So just keep that in mind. I think that's it for Granddaddy Longlegs from me.
Okay.
What would you like to say about them?
The
that
only
you
other
want people
thing,
to know?
yeah, the only other thing worth mentioning about them is that there are 2 other creatures that are sometimes called daddy longlegs,
Mhm.
and that can cause some confusion. One of them is crane flies, and so whenever people say daddy longlegs are venomous or poisonous, they're definitely not talking about harvestmen because, as we just said, they don't have any fangs,
Mhm.
and they're definitely not talking about crane flies because they don't have any fangs or any venom either. In fact, most crane flies don't even eat as adults; they eat only as babies.
Oh,
But there
wow.
is a third creature that is sometimes called daddy longlegs that is technically venomous, and that's this creature right here. I call these cellar spiders.
Can I hold that up? to
Yes,
the
you
camera?
can, but a lot of people call these daddy longlegs or granddaddy longlegs. And I think part of the confusion is that they think that this is a harvestman when really this is what I think of as a cellar spider. This is a true spider. It does have venomous fangs. This is one of the most common spiders found inside structures in Kentucky. In
Okay.
fact, I knew this morning, this wasn't in this jar this morning, I knew coming in here that I could find one. I found it within a few seconds. There's hundreds of them in this room, just
What?
living here normally.
When me and you just walked in here.
Oh
this
yeah,
one?
yeah.
Where did you find that?
There's one right there. See it?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just everywhere, and they're in my house. They're one
So
of the
tell
most.
me again what are they existing on?
They are existing in here on. We sometimes have tiny little
You can
flies.
stay there and talk. I'm gonna go look
Sure.
at this one.
We have tiny little flies that breed in here, not on purpose, but because we have fruit and stuff, like little fruit flies
Right.
and things. So they feed on that, and that's what they feed on in your house too. Just little flies that
But
almost.
they're not going to harm me and you.
No, they
Be
do
around.
have venom. They probably technically could bite somebody, but their venom. I actually just looked up a paper the other day in anticipation of this. Their venom has nothing in it in particular that's more dangerous than any other spider venom.
So do you think? I love trying to figure these things out, and if you don't know, it's fine. Is that where you think maybe this Granddaddy Longlegs thing came from?
I don't know.
I love that kind of.
I have
trying
no
to figure
idea.
That kind of stuff out.
The only thing that I think is interesting one thing that I think is interesting about this myth is that when I was a kid, I didn't hear this myth.
Really?
And I went to
How old are you?
camp. I'm 50 whatever. What year is this again? I'm 53.
Okay.
And I grew up in Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
and I was around Daddy Longlegs all the time because I went camping and was outside
Mhm.
all the time. I did not hear this myth until I got this job. And then I started hearing it from kids. My theory, and this is more of a joke than a theory, is I think that camp counselors dreamed this up as a way to scare kids. Like, because Daddy Longlegs,
I can believe that.
Daddy Longlegs love being inside tents.
Yeah,
If it's
sure.
dark in there, or cabins.
Sure.
And I bet some camp counselor said, "Hey, did you know that that's the world's most poisonous spider, but its fangs are too small to pierce human skin?" And that
Oh, wow.
spiraled up like folklore. That's just a guess.
Okay, I'm going to say on camera because I say this all the time. Don't do that to children.
Yes.
Our goal and my goal in talking to Blake is to get more people outside. So if
Yeah.
you're a camp counselor and you're doing that, stop.
Yeah.
We want kids to get outside.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So that is probably what a lot of people will also see and think are Granddaddy Longlegs.
Could be. And like I said,
That's
this
pretty
is
cool.
almost in every house in the United States and Kentucky. If I go into a house, I'm almost certain to find one of those if I look around long enough.
Okay.
But they
Cool.
aren't hurting anybody.
Right. Okay. That dude over there's just hanging
Yep.
out. He's listening.
Yeah.
All right. Spiders of Kentucky and arachnid ecology is my next header.
Okay.
Okay. First question. Of all the spiders of Kentucky, how many are considered medically significant in terms of a bite? Thank you, Eric Conley.
Yeah, the only ones that that our department recognizes as being something of medical significance. Any spider could bite you and maybe create a wound that could get infected.
Hmm.
And it's also possible, apparently this is very, very rare, that almost any kind of spider bite could lead to like a sensitivity reaction, like an allergic reaction to a bee sting, something like that, although that apparently is very, very rare. but there are really only two species that we consider to be of medical significance to just sort of anybody, and that's black widow and brown recluse.
And we'll get some shots to talk about them and get some shots of them here in a minute.
Yes.
Okay. So the wolf spiders, because this is what I like to talk about.
Yeah.
I take people out all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we're out and all we have is a knife laying
Yeah.
on the ground in the leaves.
Oh yeah,
We're
and
gonna
that's
get-
where the wolf spiders are.
We get spiders on us.
Yes.
Is that a problem?
No. Wolf spiders are one of the most common kinds of spiders in terms of numbers in Kentucky. If you're out, especially in leaf litter, that is their domain. They are the lions there. They are in there ruling that area, and they'll climb on you. They'll look at you. It's possible that one of them might bite you. You would have to. It would
I've
have
been
to be
bitten
a,
by them before.
Yeah, okay. I've
no-
never been bitten by one.
No ill effects
Yeah,
afterwards. So.
and that's a very typical spider bite.
But I did feel it and
Yeah.
it hurt.
Yeah, it hurt.
Yeah.
But there's no medical significance to it.
Okay.
And then their relatives, the fishing spiders, are even bigger than the wolf spiders, and they look very threatening as well. They're almost as big as a small tarantula here in Kentucky. You've probably
Do you
seen
have some
those
of that
too.
in here?
I don't have a live one. I might be able to find a.
I have
one
seen
in a,
those.
yeah.
What I think is those. Listen
Yeah.
to you describe it.
But they aren't dangerous either.
Or let me ask this question because I see this a lot.
Mhm.
Are wolf spiders the little critter that I'm seeing when I'm got a headlamp on? I lay down in the leaves.
Their
and
eyes?
And their
Yeah,
eyes. Or what,
uh-huh.
what's happening there?
There's just their eyes reflect light, just like a deer's does, and so you're
Okay.
just seeing their eyes.
Because that creeps people out that are new.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's nothing there that's causing any problem for
No,
humans. It's just
they're just there. They're always
reflecting
there.
light.
And sometimes, if you're in the right spot, you might see a whole lot of those eyes
Oh, yeah.
because each spider is going to have 8 of those, and there might be 30, 40, 100 wolf
Oh, I have.
spiders out there. And
It's a real common thing for our folks that go out, particularly if we're doing like an advanced survival
Mhm.
course or something, because we're literally laying in the leaves
Mhm.
sometimes. That might be our only blanket.
Okay.
And so we'll be, people get freaked out and they hit their headlamp and there's like, Craig, and there's all kinds of, but they're not causing a problem for us.
Nope.
No. Okay. We hear a lot about black widows and brown recluse. Are there
Mhm.
any other species, which you've already answered?
No.
No, there's nothing really significant here in Kentucky. What about just nationwide? Are there tarantulas?
We have tarantulas in the United States.
Mhm.
The closest ones to Kentucky get to Missouri. So they,
okay.
they get fairly close to us, but they apparently don't cross the the Mississippi River.
Okay.
But they aren't of any particular danger to anybody.
Okay.
And then all of our other spiders in Kentucky are not considered of any significance.
Another Eric Comley question here.
Okay.
Are any spiders known to be pollinators, like bees,
Um,
butterflies, for example?
Yes. They're as far as I know, there's no spiders that specialize in pollination. Like a bee, it is designed to pollinate. Like that's its lifestyle. And there's a few ants and beetles and butterflies that do that as well.
Mhm.
Spiders might accidentally pollinate by going up into a flower, killing something up there, and then going to another flower and just moving pollen around by accident. But they aren't really built or designed for it. One that I could imagine possibly doing that would be crab spiders because they hang out in flowers, but usually they don't move to another flower too often. So spiders probably don't do a lot of pollinating, but they might a little bit.
So other insects are their primary diet?
Yes.
Do they play a role in overall ecology of limiting certain types of other insects or keeping a carrying capacity of anything out there? What
Like a crab spider in flowers.
I don't know. That was just wondering.
Spiders are definitely out
Basically,
there.
what's the role? What are they eating and why are they eating?
They're
Just
eating
'cause
they're
hungry?
eating mostly insects, and there are a lot of spiders out there, and they probably have some role in reducing the number of insects numbers out there.
Mhm.
But I don't know if anyone has ever actually measured what is the real impact, because there's a lot of spiders out there, but there's more insects.
Right.
So it's sort of hard to tell what their real impact is on the population numbers.
Question here: some spiders actively hunt while others build webs.
Yes.
What determines which one they choose to do? Is it just built into?
Yeah, it's based on what species they are.
Okay.
So they don't really choose. Some spider species are web builders, some are active hunters, and some are more like ambush hunters. But yeah, so the orb weavers, the cobweb spiders, a couple of others, they specialize in building a web and snagging their prey. And those spiders tend to be a little dainty and actually not very well adapted to even walking without being on their web. So
Really?
they really can't go out and hunt. But then you have things like
Okay.
wolf spiders and tarantulas, which are a little bit more robust and don't really build a web, and they go out and actually hunt for things.
So what do they stay in a hole? I mean, do they
Some
stay
of
in the
them do.
cavity of a tree? What do they do to?
Some of them do. A lot of wolf spiders, like I said, they're in the leaf litter, so they hide in the leaf litter during the day and then come out and hunt. Jumping spiders are active hunters. They might hide in a piece of a crevice of bark on a tree. Tarantulas will sometimes have kind of a burrow that they'll come in and out of. And there are a handful of spiders, like trapdoor spiders, and some wolf spiders do this as well, that actually do build a burrow. And they stay there and they wait for things to come to them.
Okay.
And we have those in Kentucky. A lot of people don't realize we have trapdoor spiders and burrowing wolf spiders in Kentucky, and some of them are quite large.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
large.
like
Yeah.
it's just a little bit below tarantula size,
Mhm.
but a little bit above what you'd think of as a large wolf spider.
So I see these pretty regular,
Mhm.
and people are like, oh, people that are new are
Mhm.
like, ooh, that's a tarantula.
Right.
And it does kind
It
of
looks
have
a
that
lot like a
for somebody
tarantula.
like me
Mhm.
that's new to spiders and what have you.
Mhm.
Okay, I knew I had a question from one of the other guys when you brought it up, so I'll go ahead and get into it. Jumping spiders are fascinating because of their vision and motion tracking
Mhm.
abilities. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Tell us about their eyes and how that works for a jumping spider, or what's going on there. Why do they jump, and how did they do it so well?
We're not sure exactly all these questions, but they do have extremely large eyes. So most spiders have 8 eyes, and on most spiders they'll just have a couple small ones here, a couple little ones here, and they're sort of all spread around. But jumping spiders, 2 of their 8 eyes are very large, and so they're believed to have the best vision among all spiders. Nobody's really quite sure how well they're seeing there. Like, are they actually seeing images? Are they just seeing movement? But they do seem to have extraordinarily good vision as far as spiders go. And they hunt with vision. They're out in the daytime, so a lot of spiders are nighttime spiders, but jumping spiders are out there during the day, depending on vision. And when they see something that's about the right size for them to kill, they jump on it, and they can usually jump right on it, and then they kill it.
Somebody that's listening, I know what they're thinking. They're waiting on me to walk through there and jump on me.
No, they usually don't jump on people. I think they can tell that we're bigger than they are.
Yeah.
They will if you're kind of still around them, they will sometimes jump on you because they might think you're a structure, and they'll crawl around on you a little bit. But when you're moving around, I mean, you have to think about, they're out there with deer and raccoons. They don't want to jump on those things.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get onto structures and to flies. So if it's something big moving around, they're usually going to back off of you. They'll usually keep watching you, which is kind of cool. A lot of people talk about how jumping spiders seem to be aware that you're there.
Yeah.
And it does seem like they are. It seems like they can sort of tell what you're doing, and they're sort of being wary.
But it's primarily their eyesight. There's nothing like a tick where, and forgive me and tell me if I'm wrong about this, ticks have some possibly heat sensing capability, so they can sense body heat coming through the woods. Is that true? Before we get into ticks?
I believe that ticks can sense some of
Okay.
that stuff. I don't know if jumping spiders can or not.
Okay.
I believe they're mostly vision.
If they got these big eyes, that's what they're
Yeah,
probably. Okay. Is there another Eric Conlon question? Thanks, Eric. Love you. There's a lot of research on snake venom for
Okay.
medical applications. Is any of that going on with spiders like brown recluse? And
Yeah, they definitely make anti-venom, at least for black widow. I'm not sure if they do that for brown recluse. And I know with a lot of insect venoms, there's work on applications for pain and arthritis with some wasp venoms. I'm not sure how much of that has been done with spider venom. And then most of the research that I know of with spider venom is trying to figure out what chemicals are in there, and is it dangerous to human skin or not, and that kind of thing.
Another good question from the other cadre, one of our instructor cadre.
Mm-hmm.
He had read somewhere that human activities influence the evolution of spiders to the point of making them better at hiding, possibly even strengthening their webs. Is it something that you've come across at all?
I have not read that. I would think that might be unlikely, except maybe in the case of the handful that are around us a lot, like those cellar spiders.
Mm-hmm.
Although they don't hide, they just sit there.
Yeah.
But I would find it hard to imagine that we have influenced spider evolution very much.
That's
But
a long process.
It is, but who knows? There might be a paper out there. We've definitely influenced. We think we've influenced a few other creatures, like some mammals and things that have learned to avoid light pollution and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
I don't know if
Hmm.
we've manipulated spiders like that yet.
Okay, light pollution. Interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't even think to ask that one. What's the process like for a spider building a web?
Okay.
What's going on there?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's worth looking up on YouTube and watching some time-elapse videos. But it's extremely complicated because you have this one spider who's much smaller than the web that it builds, and it is somehow able to build a web in some cases out in the middle of a field, and you wonder how it does this. And a lot of what it does is it puts an anchor part of its web up on one structure, walks down, leaving this string behind it, walks across to another structure, climbs up, and then pulls it taut. So now it has a line. And then it goes and does that again for another line and another line and another line. And then it goes in the middle and connects it all together. So it's a very laborious process. Somehow they're able to do all of this in one night and then rebuild parts when it needs to. So it is a really amazing feat of engineering. And in the meantime, most of the spiders that build webs can't see very well. And it's at nighttime.
Oh, really?
So they're doing all this just by knowing how high they are, I guess, by feel.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's an amazing process.
Okay, so our organization does a lot of tracking, tracking animals, tracking humans, like a lot. So some of these questions are based around that.
Okay.
So you just mentioned that probably take a night for a spider to make a web.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that pretty common among species and across species?
Yeah, the ones that make the big webs, the orb weavers, they usually get that done within hours of time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Not just minutes.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So if like we had and the reason I'm asking is one of my man tracking instructors has a video of a border patrol agent getting out of his vehicle because he's got a camera in his vehicle.
Yeah.
And the spider builds a web from the open door back to the cab in about 5-10 minutes.
They could get.
And it's not huge. Don't get me wrong. It's not huge.
They could definitely get a handful of cross lines done.
Yeah.
In that, it also depends on the species. Like there are some spiders that don't really build a big organized web. They just build a few lines.
Yeah.
And you could imagine those being able to do that a little bit more quickly.
And are they doing the same thing? Are they even if they're just building a few lines? Are they doing that to catch
prey,
flying insects?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's their only goal with that.
All right. Anything about spiders in general that we need to know? We should know.
The only thing I would say is that I'm out in the woods, outdoors in Kentucky a lot. I take my kids outside. The last concern on my mind as far as safety is spiders. I don't even think about them. If my kids find a black widow, I say, hey, let's take a picture. They know not to touch it, but we just don't worry about it.
So where are we likely to find black widows out? And then I'll ask you the same question for brown recluse.
Okay, so that's a good thing to know because black widows are, for one thing, they can be found almost anywhere, and they are common in the forests. But they are also very common in urban areas. Black widows tend to like things that are close to the ground and hidden little places. So I find them a lot in urban areas under manhole covers, under things like sprinkler control covers that are embedded in the ground, things like that. They'll also get into hollowed out like tires, old tires that are sitting around.
Do they like moisture? Those things seem like they would have moisture.
They like humidity, but not necessarily. Doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of water in there.
Okay.
And in the woods, we find them in hollow trees. We find them in rip off bark off a tree, and if there's a hollow space in there, they might be in there.
Like a shagbark hickory too.
Yeah, something like that.
Or sycamore or something.
And you will sometimes find them in what literally seems to be underground. Like you will dig underground, you will find rocks underground and spaces between the rocks, and there'll be black widows there, and you wonder how did they get there? And presumably they're finding little crevices to get down there. But they love secluded places that are very close to the ground. I don't find them inside buildings where people live very often, except maybe garages. But outdoors in Kentucky, I'm pretty confident that if you gave me some kind of like a Bear Grylls challenge and dropped me in a parachute anywhere in Kentucky, that I could find a black widow within a couple of hours. Maybe.
Would you carry a Bear Grylls knife?
I would, yeah. And then I would have it bite me on purpose and give a 1 to 10 pain thing.
Oh, man. That's awesome. All right. I knew Eric suggested you for a reason, and there it is. So I've had two experiences with black widows.
Mhm.
One was there was one that was living in a flower bed that
Yes,
I had,
that's
and
Mhm.
it would do it almost exactly like you were saying. There was a little spot in the garden. It would be in and out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, when I would go to this flower bed, it would go and hide,
Mhm.
and then later on, it would come back out and hang out
Yeah.
outside.
Mhm.
That's pretty common.
That's pretty common. We talk to a lot of people who find them in flower beds. People will find them underneath like playground equipment in schools, so they're very common in those areas. One place that's a little bit unusual that I sometimes find them, they'll actually be in dense shrubbery sometimes. That seems to be kind of rare. They usually are more in a hidden place than that.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, I'll find them in blackberries or something like that. So that would be a place where you might be a little more likely to get tangled up with one of them.
Yeah. The other experience I had with them was I saw like dozens of them in a pile in a old fire lay at a Christian camp, like a camp setting. My son was like, came to me, he's like, Dad, had him go build. He was going to build fire setups and we could teach. And he came back. He said, Dad, I think this fire pit is full of black widow spiders.
Oh, you mean like the rocks around it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
perfect. That's a
Okay.
perfect black. That would be the first place I would look. Would be stones that humans have moved around.
Yeah.
Because that's easy for them to get into.
Okay.
We find them in places like fire rings often.
Okay. Well, that's good.
But
to
like
know.
I said,
that is something.
I don't worry about it 1 second. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the same thing. I mean, we ended up teaching the class right there with kids all around us because they ended up going because it was huge and they were over on one side and we just went to the other side and let the black widows do their thing over there, right? Okay, all right.
And another thing some people ask me, they're like, we have black widows on our campsite or our playground or our garage or whatever. Should we kill them? And my answer is always the same thing. It's you can kill them, but we'll make more. They're just everywhere. It's like bailing the ocean. Black widows are extremely common. If you clear them out from a playground or from a fire ring, they'll just come right back in eventually. So there's really no point. You just need to be aware that they're just out there and they could be almost anywhere that's in a little hidden spot like that.
Right. Okay.
And when you find them though, they're not going to come after you. They're just going to sit there or go away or try to get away.
That's been my
That's
experience.
the only thing they're going to do.
I've seen them, and those two are very memorable experiences, but I've seen them several times, and they just do their own thing. They just kind of get out of my way, and I do my own thing. Okay, I call it the Woods Mojo. You take care of the woods will take care of you.
Uh-huh.
All right, ticks.
Okay,
Let's talk about ticks.
So ticks.
Oh,
now,
wait a minute. No, let's go back to brown recluse.
Oh, brown recluses.
Let's do brown
Okay.
recluse, and then we'll go to ticks.
Yeah, so brown recluses are a little different from black widows. So for one thing, the venom is very different. Black widows, when a black widow bites you, you get symptoms right away. It's pain, it's heat, sweating. Maybe you'll have a hard time moving. You can have like organ failure as these organs are dealing with venom going through your whole body. So very acute, very serious problems, at least sometimes. Sometimes people don't even have that much of an effect, or sometimes you can have a dry bite. But what I just described to you is like the worst case scenario. That's black widow bite. Brown recluse bite is very different. Brown recluse bites you might get some of those acute effects, but maybe not very many. But what we worry about with brown recluse is the necrotizing effect. Their venom has the ability to cause wounds that don't heal very well. And so this is something that's going to progress over days or weeks. But with the caveat of that is that a lot of people look up on the internet and they see people holding up, they just have bones for a hand left, and they say it's a brown recluse bite and my body is rotting away. That may happen sometimes, but it doesn't seem to be that's true. There's a lot of mystery and misinformation about brown recluses and their bites and how potent this venom is. There's a lot of misidentification between brown recluse bite versus something like MRSA.
Right.
Because they can look very similar even to a doctor. And MRSA really does cause
I had that.
flesh to go away.
I had an issue where I got a spider bite, don't even know what it was, that ended up getting MRSA. And we don't know if, I had MRSA on my skin and it just introduced a hole such that the MRSA got into me or whatever, or if it came from the bite or whatever it was it bit me.
And then in that case, though, I have to ask you, did you see the spider biting you?
No.
Was it just maybe somebody who told you it might have been a spider bite?
And that's what I'm saying. There's just so
you might not
we don't
have
know.
been a spider bite.
It could have been a mosquito.
It could have been a pimple.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good point.
So what we think is happening out there is, and there are studies. I'm not just making this up, although I haven't done the research myself. But what we think happens sometimes is somebody goes to the doctor, they've got this wound that's spreading, and the doctor says, well, you've got a bacterial infection. The person says, where did it come from? The doctor says, who knows, maybe a spider bite.
And so now it's a spider
now
bite.
it must be a spider bite.
I see.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
The doctor's just trying to move it along.
Right.
To
And they're practicing medicine.
Yes.
They're over here and they don't know.
Yeah.
But let's run with it, kind of thing. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and again, but the good thing to know about brown recluses, though, is they are not in the woods. Brown recluses are an indoor creature. They're in the outdoors in other parts of the United States, like Oklahoma, Texas. That's kind of where they're supposed to be. But what we have done for them, and there's probably a little bit of climate change here as well, but what we have done for them is we have given them dry, warm places to live outside of their normal range. They like dry, warm places. So we've provided them attics and basements to live in. And so they don't live outdoors here. It's too cold for them. But they really like to live indoors in an attic. So they are very common indoors. I've seen them indoors frequently. I've seen one brown recluse in Kentucky outdoors one time, and it was on a structure outdoors. It was on like a
Because it
a
had
barn.
been inside,
Probably, yeah.
Hmm.
So
Do those two build webs?
Oh yes, black widows definitely build a web. They build a small web that's about the size of a grapefruit, or maybe even a little smaller than that. Usually on the ground or underground. And then brown recluses don't really make much of a web. They kind of line the area that they live with web, and they use web to make their egg sacs, but they don't really snare prey in webs. Another good thing to mention about this, this is related to black widows and brown recluses and spiders in general. You're walking in the woods, and you know this probably better than anybody.
That's where I was going.
If you're walking in the woods, you will almost certainly walk into spider webs. The spiders that make those webs are never black widows.
Thank you.
They are never brown
Thank you for saying
recluses. They are just orb weavers. Some of them actually are black and look kind of scary looking. They're called it's the Microthena genus, but they are totally harmless.
You say that
and
3 times really quick.
What did you say?
You say that 3 times.
Microthena. But they are totally harmless. We have about 3 species, and you will run into them in trails right at your face.
Right.
Black widows do not build large webs. They don't build high webs. Black widows build webs down low.
So there's no spiders that we're going to run into while we're out there hiking, moving through the woods.
Nope.
That's going to bite our necks and we're going to die.
Nope.
Okay. We got it. Thank
Yep.
you for saying that, because I've said that for years. Ticks. Let's talk about ticks. Man,
So-
we could talk. We might be able to need to come back and talk about ticks.
We
There's
could
a
do
lot here.
ticks as a separate, because ticks are, now you're moving from something that I don't worry about to something that I worry about every moment that I'm in the woods. I usually tell people that I have ticks in my brain so that I don't get them in my body. I'm thinking about tick prevention every moment when I'm out there. I really do not like ticks. I don't want them on me. A lot of people worry about, you hear people talking about deer ticks and Lyme disease. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Lyme disease. There's a whole lot of different kinds of ticks. Almost all of them can give you some kind of a disease. It doesn't matter which disease it is. You don't want any of them.
Right.
And you've also probably heard about red meat allergy, which is
Alpha-gal.
something that we get, alpha-gal, which is something that we get from probably our most common tick, which is the Lone Star tick. Lone Star tick is probably not giving us Lyme disease, but it gives us red meat allergy. You don't want either of those things.
Right.
So whenever we work with kids, we talk about tick safety several times a day. We talk about the right kind of clothes to wear, the right kind of repellents to wear, and how to check yourselves for ticks. One of the things that they sometimes tell people is don't walk in like weedy areas, but when we're out there studying insects, we're going to be walking in weedy areas.
Sure.
So we can't worry about that part, but we do a lot of tick checks at least several times a day, and we wear the right repellents. And
from your perspective, what is that repellent?
So there's a handful that are considered to be effective against ticks. Ones with the active ingredient DEET, D-E-E-T. Ones with the active ingredient picaridin. I will usually treat my clothes ahead of time with the permethrin. And the permethrin is interesting because it's not really a repellent. It kills the ticks. So that's very appealing to me.
Sure.
So when they climb on your boots and your pants especially, those are the articles of clothing that I will, and socks actually, I will concentrate my permethrin on those. And then I'll also wear some DEET like up here, and I'll spray an extra layer of DEET on the shoes. So that's usually my approach. And I do that
And it
every
works for
time.
you.
It works pretty well.
Sounds exactly like what I do.
Yeah. When I'm in the woods, if I'm diligent with that,
Mhm.
I can go several days without getting any ticks on me, or at
Mhm.
least none that I see, because they climb in you and they presumably die or leave.
Hmm.
And it also works against chiggers, the same chemicals, and also mosquitoes.
Right. Okay. Just in case this might be the first time somebody's listening, we don't want to put that on our hat. If we sweat or rain, it gets in our eyes.
Yeah, the
I try to-
permethrin. It says on the jug what you are and aren't supposed to put it on. You're not supposed to put it on underwear.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to put it on your hat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just a good reminder if you're
Mhm.
not, if you've never heard us talk about it before. All right. What else about ticks? Should we? Oh, two things regarding if we. And this is another instructor question. I'm sorry, I keep going back and forth.
Mhm.
If we get envenomated by a brown recluse or a black widow,
Mhm.
what's the process after that? What can we do? What should we do to get to the hospital? Ignore it, or
I would say if a person knows that they got bitten by a black widow or a brown recluse, it's probably a good idea to seek medical attention.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily, especially if it's a brown recluse, I wouldn't necessarily, if it's midnight, I don't know if you necessarily need to go right then. Black widow is a little more serious, especially if it's a very young person or someone who is compromised in some way, who's already sick.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Then you might want to get them immediate medical attention.
Okay.
For me, the biggest worry was something like black widow, and I think the odds of this happening would be extremely low. But what if you were way out in the wilderness by yourself? You only have one canteen of water, you're several hours from your car, and you get bitten by a black widow. Now this is not a good situation because you can get dehydrated. It's going to be very uncomfortable and difficult for you to move.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have anybody helping you, that could be a serious situation. But for just somebody around the house, I would say probably go ahead and get medical attention right away. But if for some reason you can't, like nobody has a car and you have to wait for a while for the ambulance to get there, it's probably not the end of the world.
Okay, good. And ticks, same thing. Ticks.
Now,
how do we handle ourselves when we find a tick that's on us?
Yeah. So the rule of thumb with ticks is if they do get on you, you want to remove them as quickly as possible, and if you can get them off of you before a few hours have elapsed, that's very good, because a lot of them, it takes a while for them to start sort of back spitting the stuff that's in them into you.
Yeah.
So getting them off of there before a few hours have elapsed is really good. You want to remove them by taking a pair of tweezers and grabbing them right where their little mouth parts attach to your skin and pulling them that way. Because if you grab them by the body, they're like a balloon, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you grab them by the body, you're squeezing all those pathogens into your own blood. So you don't want to do that. You want to pull them up by the mouth parts. And then what I would say after that is if you are very worried about getting a tick disease and you have found one that was actually attached to you, it might be a good idea to consult a physician and tell them what's going on, and they'll tell you kind of what symptoms to watch out for over the next few weeks. But I think for most of us,
should we take the spider or the tick to the doc? Should we save it?
It might be a good. It's with ticks, I would say it's especially a good idea to do that, because ticks can actually be tested for whether they're carrying a pathogen or not. Mostly, they're just going to treat symptoms anyway.
Okay.
Like I said, there's not really an antivenom for brown recluse, and there is an antivenom for black widow, but they usually don't use it because it causes.
It's expensive.
I think it's expensive, and apparently it can sometimes cause as many problems as.
Wow.
So usually with both of those spiders, they just deal with symptoms. So topical symptoms with the brown recluse, and they give you a lot of pain relievers and anti-inflammatories for the black widow.
I just now thought about something on ticks. Is your department the one that's doing the study where you can send in ticks?
Yes, although I'm not sure if they're still doing that, because the person who was heading that study just left us, although I think they are still doing that. And it's on our website. So if you just Google University of Kentucky entomology, it's actually, I think it's still on our front page.
I'll have a link in the description, everybody, so you can just look down below. It'll be there.
But just to advise people, that is not really meant as a screening option for people. It's more of research for us.
Right.
So we get that tick, we see if it's got a pathogen, and we put that in a database that we're studying, and then usually many months later, because it takes a long time to do this, we'll send those
Sure.
results back to you, and by then it's not of use
Okay.
to you. You really, if you want to know whether a tick has a pathogen or not, you really need to go to the doctor, and they will send it to somebody else, some other kind of private lab
Right.
that does it quickly.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean those to be together.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
But
thanks for making that clear.
we are trying to figure out more about what's going on with these things, because there's really not a whole lot of research that's been done
on the
on
pathogens in
ticks.
ticks.
on anything about ticks.
Really?
Oh
my gosh.
Because there's just, for one thing, they're not insects,
Yeah.
so entomologists don't really study them.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of tick scientists. We actually happened to have one a couple of years ago, Dr. Anna Pasternak, and she has gone on to greater things. But tick scientists are sort of few and far between, which is kind of unfortunate.
Interesting. Okay, moving on to some bigger, broader entomology stuff. Mosquitoes are a nuisance. What role do they play in our, why are they here?
Yeah,
What are they
the
doing?
only role that they play is just like any other parasite. They're just out there trying to make good for themselves. They do have a little bit of a role in the ecosystem in terms of the food web. So they are providing food to things like dragonflies and spiders. Mosquito babies exist in water by the millions, and
Right.
dragonfly babies live underwater too, and so they're hunting these mosquitoes. So they are a part of the ecosystem. But one important thing to know is that most of the mosquitoes that bite us here in Kentucky are not supposed to be a part of our ecosystem because they're invasive. The common black and white one, the
Yeah.
Asian tiger mosquito, that is on me anyway, that's the most common mosquito that bites me.
Yeah.
That's an invasive species. It's not supposed to be here. So we don't want that. It serves no role in our environment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is everything from Asia that's here a problem?
A lot of the
I
creatures
should
that
have said
are
it that way. Just bush honeysuckle,
yeah.
red maple.
Yeah, we're not supposed to have a lot of these species. They're invasive species. Our department is actually very interested in studying invasive species and letting people know about them.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, the note that the Asian tiger mosquito is an invasive species, it doesn't seem to register. So you do not have to feel bad about killing that one. We don't like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not good. Not good at all.
So it seems like this is another one of our instructor questions, that insect populations are declining globally. Is that a correct assessment?
So that's definitely something that has been studied by several scientists. There are some studies that show that in particular parts of the world that insect populations have dropped over the past 20, 50 years, and that's probably true. I would just say that some of us have a little skepticism that it's as bad as what people are saying. So there's a lot of different opinions on that. There's other studies that show that insect populations, at least in certain areas, are fine. What I think is happening is that in urban areas and in places where we farm, you basically have to assume that the insect populations there are very low, at least the diversity.
Right.
But
Sure.
but in the places that we allow to stay wild, the insect diversity is probably still pretty high.
Okay.
So the answer to that problem is let's keep areas wild. And
Absolutely.
another thing that people worry about a lot, I consider myself an environmentalist, but a lot of my environmentalist friends really worry a lot about pesticides and what that's doing to insect populations and animal populations. Pesticides, they do some bad things, but by far the worst thing that we do to insects and to any kind of animal or any kind of wildlife is take away their habitat. When we turn a prairie or a woods into a parking lot, we aren't just spraying something on it and killing it right then. We're taking it away from them forever.
Right.
That also goes for our houses and our driveways. And that's what's driving a lot of diversity issues is taking away habitat.
Yep. Okay. I'm 100% with you on all that, for sure. Right now, you mentioned in the email when we were going back and forth, you don't have a whole lot to say on this, but do you have anything you can share about how other places in the world are utilizing insects in their diets?
Yeah, so
and where that might lead for us possibly? Or?
yeah, so there are other parts of the world where insects are either considered a snack or a real part of the diet. You've heard of I can't remember the word for it, but the tacos that are made with grasshoppers
Yeah, I don't know.
in Latin cultures,
Yeah.
and that's apparently a common thing. I've never eaten that myself.
Me either.
There are things like giant water bugs and centipedes that are kind of roasted and eaten. Tarantulas are roasted and eaten sometimes. I don't know how common that is in other places. Like, is that something that they're eating every day, or is that more like I'm trying to think of some equivalent in like an oyster, something that they only eat rarely in those places.
Gotcha.
As a novelty. I'm really not sure about that. And in our country, insects have never really been a big part of our diet. Obviously, they're close relatives. The crustaceans are. We love our shrimp and our crawdads, and they're not that far distantly related to insects. But there has been some movement and some progress of people trying to turn things like just the same kind of crickets that you buy for fish bait and mealworms into edible foods. And they are certainly perfectly edible. And so there have been some things like snack bars, flour that's been made out of these things, but it's still a niche area. Me personally, I don't want to eat any bugs, and so I'm not necessarily a big proponent of that.
Okay.
One thing that I kind of worry about, and that some of the other entomologists have mentioned, is, and this is actually touched upon in the movie. What's that movie called? Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
About the train. It's a science fiction movie about a train. It's the last people on Earth. They're all on a train, and the whole society lives in this train, and they're just speeding through this world that's turned into ice. And the people in the back of the train are the impoverished people, and what they are forced to eat are the roaches that live in the train. They turn them into a gel, and that's what they have to eat.
Yum.
So my concern is, what if we're able to streamline and turn mealworms and crickets into food? Who's going to be eating that? Because it's not going to be, well, I don't want to mention any names, but it's not going to be the wealthy who's eating that. They're going to eat the steak, while the other people eat the cockroach gel. Gotcha. So that's a bit of a concern. And then the other thing is, there's this idea. One of the things we hear is, oh, insects are so much easier to raise than cattle and chickens. But in my experience, insects are actually not very easy to raise. No. Crickets are. I will not raise crickets. It's very difficult to do. Some people can do it because they raise them and sell them. Yeah, I have tried as well
for fishing.
But they're not easy to do. They're nasty, and but they also have to be kept clean in order to live. And so it's a big operation. And the ones that there are people that raise a lot of crickets, but they're kind of expensive, as you know, from buying them for fish bait. So it's not something that's necessarily easy to do. Maybe with new technology, you could somehow figure out a way to streamline it. Right. Mealworms are a little bit easier to raise, but it's not necessarily something like chicken. You kind of just set it loose and it makes eggs for you. It's not like that with bugs. So I think there's maybe some misconceptions with this idea that we can just start eating bugs.
Okay. So do you know if UK is doing any research on that kind of topic? It doesn't seem.
I don't think so.
Okay.
There are other people are, though. It's a genuine source of research, and there could be some kind of, if you figured out a way to mass produce mealworms, and you could, like, right now you go buy mealworms, it's like $1 for 10 of them, right? If you could somehow make that much cheaper, maybe that could be some kind of viable. And there are applications that are actually used, like black soldier fly larvae are reared in mass, and they're useful in livestock feed. So there are applications for this.
What is that? Black soldier? What?
Black soldier fly. They're just a big maggot that's about this big that lives in just garbage, compost, and they're pretty easy to raise. But people don't want to eat a maggot.
Yeah.
So
I've done a video on doing that.
Yeah.
I pulled maggots off of pawpaws and cooked them and ate them.
I would consider that one because it's off a pawpaw, but I wouldn't want the one that's
I did the research, and you tell me, you're the man to ask. So the research that I read at the time is basically, if that thing is living on pawpaws, because here's how it came about. I went and picked some pawpaws up, put them on the kitchen counter, and then maggots came out of it. Okay, so I'm like, okay, they've been living in that pawpaw the whole time. Right. So it was my understanding, explain this to me, that basically their internal self starts to change, much like the pawpaw nutrition in it. Is that an accurate assessment?
That's probably true for a lot of creatures. The thing you have to watch out for, though, is that there's not just one thing that eats pawpaw. Whatever you found was probably some kind of maggot. But if you have somebody out there who's not sure what these species are, and they find something on pawpaw that's maybe not that same kind of maggot, it could be
Mhm.
something that's a little more dangerous, like some
Mhm.
of our caterpillars. They don't really look like a maggot, but for a novice, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
Some caterpillars have nasty spikes and spines on them that are
Mhm.
kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
So
I don't eat those.
you just want to make sure you
I
know
don't
what
eat
you're
maggots
doing.
either. I did it one time.
Yeah.
It's YouTube, man. I got to make a YouTube.
Yeah.
120,000 people are going to see this video
Yeah.
because I ate maggots about 5
Yeah,
years
yeah.
ago. You know what I mean? Okay. All right. Closing questions. I
Okay.
have 3. If there was one common misconception about arachnids or insects you could correct, what would it be?
I guess just the idea that that spiders are out there dangerous. Like I said, I'm out there all the time. I'm out there with my kids. They're the last things that I worry about. Instead, I'm thinking about ticks. As far as bugs, I'm thinking about hornets and wasps. They're a little bit dangerous. They can be dangerous.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about falling down or
Mhm.
running out of water.
Mhm.
Those are my concerns when I'm out in the woods, not bugs and
Yeah.
spiders.
Okay. Number 2, what's one species or aspect of entomology that you wish more people appreciated?
Oh man.
Boom. Get to ask the bug guy this question. What is it?
Probably just the sheer biodiversity of it. Like I mentioned, we have about 15,000 species of insects just in Kentucky, and you compare that to something like birds, where you just got a couple hundred species or whatever. And in the world, we've got 1 million species, more than that. We're discovering new ones all the time.
Amazing, isn't it?
So just the sheer number of species and the biodiversity. You can't learn about insects and their biodiversity without becoming an environmentalist. Because as soon as you understand how many species of insects there are, how closely they're tied into the environment, and how there's this feedback system of the insects make the environment work and the environment makes the insect work, you realize that there is no part of nature that we can just safely go and destroy. There is no desert or woods that's like what would you call it, expendable.
Mm-hmm.
Every part of nature is out there functioning. Insects are in most of it. And so when you learn about this, you realize how delicate this balance is and how we need to preserve all parts of it, not just the pretty parts, not just the beautiful mountains where people want to ski or hunt. We need all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Great way of saying that. Last thing, how do people follow your research? What's going on in the entomology department? Whatever you tell me, I'm going to have links in the description for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, I would put a link to our main Department of Entomology website. I don't have that memorized, but you can find that on Google UK Entomology. A lot of the research that we're doing, we do a lot of public health research on things like mosquitoes. We do some research on things like bed bugs and cockroaches.
Okay.
We actually just recently, as some people have retired and we've hired new faculty, a lot of our research is shifting to studying habitat, especially pollinator habitat. We have several people working on bees and pollinators. And so the best place.
Is that due to changes in climate, or is it just the thing?
It's just there's because pollinators have been having a tough time for various reasons over the past 20 or 30 years. There's just a lot of focus and research for how do we protect our pollinators. And then once again, pollinator health is almost always indicative of habitat health.
Right.
So those things are very closely related. And as far as following our research, we don't do a lot on social media, at least not yet.
Mm-hmm.
But the best place to learn about us is just on our website.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's been great, Bob.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm going to do, everybody, is I'm going to walk around it. Do you still have some time to do that?
Uh-huh.
I'm going to walk around, and a lot of the video you've seen along this way is stuff that Blake's walking me around, and we're getting good video of it. So with that said, thanks for joining me for this. As always with Nature Line School, come on, join in. Let's learn together.